Hey everybody, happy holidays. My name is Cadet Cormac Jenkins. My persuasive speech is on the M14 and why it's a very poorly designed rifle. So I know that all of us have probably quite a great deal of experience with the M14 just because of our experiences at VMI. We pretty much use a skeletonized version of the weapon in all of our VMI events, whether that be our FTX or just the route line in general or parade. So we're going to look past that and we're going to look at the M14 and why it's a poor rifle design from the military standpoint. So a little bit of background on the rifle itself. The rifle was designed in 1954. It was meant to be a bridge between two popular weapons of World War II, those weapons being the M1 Garand and the BAR, which are both shown here. The BAR stands for Browning Automatic Rifle. So what they wanted to do is they pretty much wanted the best of both worlds. Is they wanted the stock and receiver of the M1 Garand, pictured here, and then they wanted the box mag and fully automatic functionality of the Browning Automatic. They also wanted to chamber it in the 7.62 by 51 NATO round, which had recently been adopted. The weapon round, that round itself, is very similar to the round that both of these weapons fire, the 30 caliber round, so that wasn't too much of a difficulty in design. Now, despite it kind of being a really good idea to put together these two weapons, it wound up being a pretty poor weapon. The reason being was that a lot of other weapons at the time that fell into the battle rifle category, and even weapons that fell outside the battle rifle category, had far superior ergonomics to this compared to this weapon. So, for example, the AK-47, made in 1947, had a pistol grip. And what a pistol grip does on a fully automatic rifle, like the M14 is it allows a lot more control under sustained fire. Now, when the M14 itself was fired in the fully automatic, it was very difficult to control, especially from standing position. It was almost impossible to put 3 rounds on the same target standing at fully automatic, which is very unreliable. The weapon could pretty much only be shot from the prone position, which was not a problem if they had experience with the BAR. Now, the weapon also itself, with the traditional rifle stock design, it was difficult to put follow-up shots on target, and that was just a problem with that design in general, not specific to the M14. But the reason why it's worth mentioning and why it makes the M14 a poor rifle is because they went with that design despite the fact that many other weapons at that time had a superior design. Now, that goes for more than just the Russians, their AK-47. So these are some examples of weapons at the same time period or a little bit before the M14 was produced. Here we have the AK-47, here we have the G3, here we have the FNFAL, which was referred to as the L1A1 by British forces. All of these weapons were made around the same time and featured a pistol grip. I mean, these two weapons here fired the same exact round as the M14 and had a much greater reliability than the M14 ever did. Even with like modernized designs and improvements to try and correct the mistakes of the previous designs, these weapons still outclass them. Now, I mentioned that designs even made previous to the M14 were far superior. So, for an example, I have the FG-42, which was a Nazi German paratroopers rifle that featured these modern ergonomics that just made the weapon much more efficient. So, despite the fact that the weapon is very unergonomic and is poorly designed in that facet, it is argued that the weapon is still very reliable because the weapon is accurate. Now, the weapon itself is very accurate. I know that we're all taught that the weapon has an effective range of 460 meters, but it's reported that the weapon is actually accurate up to ranges around 800 meters. Now, that's all fine, but the problem is that the weapon can only do that when it is maintained continuously and rigorously. Now, that is easy to do in a controlled environment, like being a competition shooter. But when the weapon itself was taken apart and cleaned like it needed to do in the environments that it saw service in, Vietnam, and even in Iraq and Afghanistan with modern variants like the M39, the weapon had to be cleaned all the time. And when it was cleaned, because the rifle barrel was not free-floating, it was mounted to the weapon itself, it was very difficult to maintain a zero and clean the weapon at the same time. Now, the weapon would become super inaccurate if it wasn't cleaned, but then when you took it apart to clean it, you had to re-zero it, which is easy to do when you have, once again, you're in a controlled environment, but that's not easy to do when you're out in the field. When you're out in the field, you want to be able to take the weapon apart and clean it, and then put it right back together and still maintain a zero. That was not the case with the M14. Now, As I mentioned earlier, some improvements were made on previous design flaws. So here we have an M14 that had a new stock, and this was a pretty easy fix. They just had to make new wooden stocks that featured pistol grips. Here we have an M14 being used by a scout sniper in Vietnam, featuring a night scope and a silencer. So the M14, despite having some problems, was still used pretty extensively, as in it saw a lot of combat, but it didn't see a long service time. It only was in service for 6 years total. That's not the case for the M21, which is the sniper variant built here. But even the M21 had the same problems as the original M14 with cleaning and losing zero. So the weapon was given another chance with the M39 EBR, which is the variant seen here, which was used in Iraq and Afghanistan between 2001 and 2008. Now, the weapon once again suffered the same exact problems, especially with the sand. With the sand and the CLP oil used to clean the weapon, that became sticky and disgusting, and that's not a problem you want to have with your rifle. And when you go to clean your rifle and it just ends up getting more dirty and then losing its zero, it becomes pretty unreliable. And for those reasons, the M39 was pretty much done away with after 2008. And just like previously, when it had saw service in Vietnam during the Cold War, it was replaced by weapons at the time that had far superior designs to it. So for those reasons, the M14 can't really be considered a very solid battle rifle. It's better off as a stepping stone. A lot of lessons were learned from it by the Department of Defense, and then they learned what they wanted to actually make their battle rifle. That concludes my presentation. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you guys have an awesome Christmas.